we're actually going to go through what this has transpired is we've had some really good graduate students that have worked in a number of different areas, and they've published these equations and published some of this data, and in the end of the day it ends up being in Journal of Animal Science, and like I can't even kind of comprehend some of the equations. So what we're trying to do is bring this into a tool, and then from a K-State perspective, we like spreadsheets. We operate on spreadsheets, and so we've used spreadsheet tools over a number of years as ways of taking more complex things and bringing it into a more practical, understandable manner on especially when it comes to some of the economics. So today, hopefully this is not an infomercial for the K-State website, but we're going to kind of walk through some of the tools that we have available. And this is for those of you that have your tablets. If you just go to ksuswine.org, this is kind of the front page that you'll get to, and you can tell we're not web designers, so we kind of bury and hide things in here. And this is the calculator page is where we're going, and there's other stuff on here like our premix updates. We've got all our journal articles and abstracts and stuff. And I know the University of Minnesota and the University of Illinois have websites that have nice organization of information in kind of a similar format. And then we have these calculators and tools, which are right in here. And this is the page that pops up. We try to keep it kind of simple, and we've got and we're just going to walk through some of these various spreadsheets here. And the first one's a feed efficiency tool. And this was actually John DeYoung, who's now with the Pipestone System, got his PhD with us about a year ago. He did this as a way of summarizing all the different factors, or not all the different factors, but some of the major factors that influence feed efficiency, so we could look at some of the differences on a basis and just set this up in different tabs, energy and lysine, all the way down to various factors. Got an input page here where you can put in just a simplistic diet range, some of the different things on where our baseline's at, so you can put in your baseline production of what you're doing, and then we can kind of walk through and look at some scenarios. And lysine and energy, this is actually another graduate student's project that we've always had the question of different dietary energy levels and predicting outcome. And so what we had her do is go into the literature and get as many research projects that had dietary energy, and did a nice meta-analysis and looked at some of the factors. And as you'd probably expect, or not expect, but that there's an interaction here between dietary lysine and net energy value of the diet. Basic nutritional principle: if you don't have enough amino acids in the diet, you're not going to utilize energy efficiently. And the interesting thing, though, in this is that she picked it up in the literature that in a lot of the experiments that were done, as best as we could characterize, a lot of the experiments that had different dietary energy levels were underfeeding amino acids when they were trying to characterize the energy levels. And we actually picked it up in a factor in this meta-analysis within, it's about 35 studies, I think, and there's about 110 data points of different studies. And so what that told us, and she characterized this interaction between, and we saw it on feed efficiency as well. Not as strong. You can see that as energy increased, feed efficiency as predicted by gain to feed. Remember, gain to feed, a better number is better. It's just the opposite of, it's the reciprocal of feed to gain. It's just that gain to feed is easier to model, so we have it presented here, where we have increasing dietary energy, increasing lysine. You can see the slope of the line as lysine increases. We do get a better improvement in feed efficiency. And so this really, it was actually pretty fundamental to me that basically in some cases we were undervaluing the value of amino acids because of the energy component. If we were underfeeding amino acids, it's not only a loss of performance from the lower amino acids, but you're reducing the response to increasing dietary energy. So it makes amino acids a lot more valuable is what it does, and changes your thinking on the economics of increasing dietary amino acids as well. Anyway, in this tab, we've got this interaction built into this calculator because it's a big, long equation, and what we've done is built it into this calculator. You can put your base lysine to energy ratios in there, and then right here is an example of feeding below the lysine to calorie ratios, and then increasing the dietary energy, and we can see we get a 5% improvement in overall energy if we're below the lysine calorie requirement of the pig, and we increase dietary energy. We get roughly a 5% improvement in feed efficiency, whereas in this second example, where we're feeding at or above the lysine to calorie ratio, we get about a 7.8% improvement in dietary energy. So it changes the calculation of whether you feed higher energy diets or not. If I'm only getting a 5% return, I'm much more likely to go to a lower energy diet. But if I'm getting a 7.8% return in feed efficiency, I'll probably go to a higher energy diet, depending on the cost of course, of the energy in the diet. So just kind of a scenario, and we don't know if we've characterized that interaction mathematically. You know, Pedro, it's whether we got it real or not, I don't know, but I think it gets us in the ballpark, and it is a good teaching tool to kind of illustrate the concept between energy and lysine interrelationships. So that has been very helpful in this feed efficiency tool. The other area we're constantly evaluating trying to figure out if we have the right equations in the tool from an amino acid standpoint. Have to thank, we've got Marcio Goncalves, who I saw him, or maybe he zipped out. He certainly led us forward in this area, characterizing these dose responses. Here, this is on a feed efficiency basis, one of our other graduate students. But what we've done is taken and tried to characterize these dose responses, and you'll notice we put in the actual data points from the pen level studies, and that's an important point when you're doing dose titrations. You need to take into account the pen level data and not just the treatment means from characterizing the dose response. And so what we're trying to do is also educate ourselves on the variability around those estimates of those equations that go into models, and trying to teach ourselves that there's a lot more variability there than we really realize in the requirement. And you know, this next step in the model would be to be able to model some confidence bands on some of those estimates and do some simulation modeling of some of the different outcomes that come in. You can see here we do it on an income over feed cost basis, and you can see the tremendous amount of variability on the pen-to-pen level. So if you're thinking a pen is reflective of a group closeout within a system, I think that's what we see. We see, right, Brent? You see lots of variability from closeout to closeout on profitability, let alone production characteristics and parameters. And so that's where we're driving ourselves is trying to understand that and quantify that better into some of our tools. The other one, looking across, I was just talking, we went in the last 3-4 years where you barely used any tryptophan. It is kind of a specialty product to kind of tag dress maybe and stuff in certain situations. Now we've gone, the price of it's gone from $25 to $30 a kilo down to, as low as $6-7 a kilo within feed mills. And we're seeing, different sources from around the world. And so characterizing the tryptophan requirement means we're formulating to, that's usually the 4th or 5th limiting amino acid with the other synthetics in there. And now lots of times we're bumping up against isoleucine requirements because we've got tryptophan in the diet. And the utilization of DDGs has really shifted our trend there from tryptophan. You can see in the DDG calculator here where we're looking at the value of DDGs, we can have a $1.50 to $2 swing per pig whether we're using DDGs or not, whether or not we're using tryptophan in diets and those kind of things. And so just got another tool here that you can go through and evaluate some of the DDG values and look at some of the pricing from that perspective. The other big area, another one here we go. This is a couple of equations that are, again, Marcio Goncalves did this in his PhD work and showing this was kind of from a tryptophan standpoint, trying to characterize that requirement on a commercial research facility basis. And you can see we have average daily gain in the top, and you can see tryptophan requirements. We had marginal improvements in growth rate across these studies, whereas gain to feed, you can see for improvements in feed efficiency, we're at a much lower level. You can see, so when we're looking at tryptophan from an amino acid basis, if you want to get the best feed efficiency, you'll feed a lot lower tryptophan level. But if you want the best growth rate, then you'll feed a lot higher level of tryptophan. And of course, basically, and from a nutritional perspective, when you're doing growth and affecting growth and maybe not affecting feed efficiency, then it comes into play of figuring out what the value of that gain is. And from a nutrition and production person's perspective, feed efficiency is usually pretty straightforward to value. From an average daily gain standpoint, we can get into all kinds of different arguments on the value of that gain, and it varies. The gain varies by season. The value of the gain varies whether you're limited in space or not limited in space, or have the capability of adding more space or not, and the effect on your market weight. And so that's what drove this building of this model. Again, Marcio was critical in developing this, and you can see we've got the curves plugged in here with average daily gain, where you get these marginal improvements in average daily gain. You get a low improvement in feed efficiency, and then it plateaus. And then translating that into whether you're in a fixed weight or a fixed time production system. And so you can see we've developed some economic scenarios there where the optimum tryptophan level may vary within production systems depending on what the needs of the production system are. And we're exploring a little bit of, do we vary the tryptophan level depending on season a little bit, depending on the need for growth rate, and what is the value of that, and whether we can get it done within our feed mills or not. So moving back into the feed efficiency tool, we've also got the characterization of ractopamine. That's been forefront with a lot of ractopamine-free programs. We get a lot of questions about what is the value of ractopamine, and so we've added this in there based on the there's some nice meta-analysis in the literature on the ractopamine response. The other one that has been critical, this is a nice one that John worked on and got into the calculator that I think there's a really nice paper in Journal of Animal Science on the effect of temperature on feed intake. And so there's a meta-analysis by Rendonneau from the French group, the INRA group. And again, big long equations in there that are really difficult from that perspective, and he's plugged this in here and done a nice job of looking at the impact of high temperature heat stress and what impact that has on feed efficiency. And so then across the finishing period, you can get some idea of, we think we see this seasonal increase in feed efficiency when those pigs have been heat stressed. And we think the biology of the pig pretty much does give us some idea of that. And then, of course, when we're below the lower critical temperature, from that standpoint, again, we get a decrease in feed efficiency. When the pig's got to heat the barn, basically their feed efficiency gets poorer. And so this has been a nice teaching tool with some of the contract growers, and we've had service people that have gone out and used it to kind of when the growers are paying the propane bill and the owner is paying the feed bill, you got to figure out where the happy medium is there. From a feed processing, feed evaluation, also John DeYoung did a lot of feed processing work, and so he built in, tried to collate all the studies that, admittedly, compared to particle size, there's a lot less studies, but trying to give us an idea. We know from the concept of more fines, you lose the feed efficiency benefit of pellets, and so tried to come up with an equation here on the pelleting side. You can see here where we have a meal diet and we have 20% fines in the pellets. You can see we get a 4% improvement, and that would be pretty close to what we would call typically a 5% improvement in feed efficiency from pelleting. Whereas if you get to 50% fines, where you lose most of the feed efficiency benefit there. Now, you would never have 50% fines, would you there, Noel? Yeah. So again, that has been a fairly useful tool to take, especially when we're in a toll milling situation and trying to educate them on what is the impact on our owners and producers. We also have it plugged in. We're going to talk a little more about, we're going to go through some of the studies on particle size. Got it built into the tool. looking at and characterizing the feed efficiency benefits on particle size too. And so looking at some of the studies, give a shout out to the Pork Board. Actually, over the last 5 years or so with the increase in feed costs, we've had several Pork Board grants, and this is one of them. Had lots of questions. We've had lots of 3-high roller mills going in the Midwest, and the RMS guys have a 4-high roller mill system too. It's dramatically more expensive than a 2 and a 3-high, and you also have more production costs associated with maintenance of rolls and electricity and those kind of things as well. And so we had Jordan Gebhardt. He's one of our PhD students working along with New Fashion Pork, and actually we worked with the RMS people and got a roller, a 4-high, in the mill, in a commercial mill. And then for this study, what we did was we opened up the bottom rolls and just ran it as a 3-high, opened up the bottom 2 sets and ran it as a 2-high. And then we ran the 4-high, ran it what we called coarse, or a 4-high fine, running down here in the 295, 300 particle size, and down here on the coarse. We didn't get as much spread as we wanted to from that standpoint, but we did get a higher particle size there with the 4-high coarse. And some of the data that Pedro showed you from Wondra, almost all the data prior to this and a lot of other studies, prior to this series of particle size studies that we've done, have used a minimum of 400 or 500 microns. And we got a bunch of people in the industry going down around the 300 micron range and those kind of things as well, from that standpoint. And so you can see average daily gain, actually, as you went from 2-high to 3-high to the 4-high fine, average daily gain actually decreased. And then with the coarser diets, average daily gain actually improved again in this study. And you can see the average daily gain is reflective of feed intake. Basically, what we were doing as we were getting down here to the finer and finer particle size, we were affecting feed intake. And this is in meal diets, I should point out as well. And so we're getting this feed efficiency response. Or not feed efficiency. Had a marginal trend in feed efficiency. You can see where the feed efficiency did get numerically better as we got to finer and finer particle size. Although here in the 4-high, we didn't have much difference within that range. Okay, and then when we looked at income over feed cost, basically our 2-high and our 4-high coarse were similar, as well as the 3-high, and then our 4-high fine was significantly lower from an income over feed cost standpoint. And so what this really told us is with a 2 or a 3-high, you can actually you can mill corn to an acceptable particle size. And we can see that when we're getting down here in this fine particle size, we are affecting feed intake, and a lot of it's got to do with flowability and palatability as well, as I'll show you some data. So looking at the effects of particle size, you can see Pedro mentioned the Wondra data along with Mario Cabrera in the early 90s. We had a 1.2% per 100 microns. And then you can see over the last few years, we've done a whole series of studies. The interesting thing here is the first thing to look at is Pedro talked about the genetic influence on feed efficiency. Look at what we went in these studies 20 years ago to what we have in our farm here in the last 4 or 5 years. Just tremendous changes, and we've actually, our market weight is about 35, 40 pounds heavier too. So, you know, this is a quantum leap in improvement in feed efficiency, but you can see over these studies, we've went from a 1.2 to about a 1% per 100 microns. And you'd expect from this last study here where we did the 2 and 3 and 4 high, you can see it looks like it might be a little flatter when we're getting down here into the very small particle sizes, which you'd expect, you know. You cannot have a linear trend going down below 0, you know, and we can't grind below 0. So, you know, this isn't a, we've always had, for many years, we've always said from a particle standpoint, grind it as low as you can to get flowability. And I think, though, we're at the point from a milling technology standpoint that we have mills on the low side, and especially if they're not consistent in their grind and we have flowability problems and we're running mash diets. Now, particle size within pelleting too, that's another area where we've done a number of studies. Again, from a pig performance standpoint, we do get the effect out in finisher. We don't get as much effect in the nursery end of things, but typically grinding and particle size within a pellet mill is more a factor of increasing the throughput of the pellet mill, where they want to go with a smaller particle size and run down in this lower end, where you got to get to the point of the efficiency of your grinding and the efficiency of your mill. And as I mentioned, within the finishing side, you know, in that last study where we've done the field study and lower particle sizes were driving down feed intake, we've seen this again in a number of nursery studies where we've done preference. Now, I gotta preface this. This is a preference study within a pen. The pigs have a choice between a very fine and a more coarse particle size. You know, sometimes when you don't give a pig a choice, you do get a little different interpretation of the data. But this does tell you that they prefer a more coarse particle size, and so we do have some impacts on feed intake itself. And this wasn't a factor of flowability; it was the same feeder and same access to feed and those kind of things. So, wrapping it up, conclusions here on particle size. Nursery pigs, we've seen from a feed efficiency benefit, little benefit in the nursery pig below 500 to 600 microns. And that kind of challenged some of our beliefs that we thought, you know, in the young pig without well-developed enzymes, that going even lower would increase the digestibility and those kind of things. But we've seen little evidence in that whole series of studies that John did below about 500-600 and some fairly negative effects on feed intake. Finishing pigs in meal diets, roughly 1% per 100 microns. We've seen that down to 300, and we think there's some plateauing there. We don't think on a practical basis going much below 300 is going to be a realistic basis. Feed intake and gain reduced, and we've got limited data on wheat as well. It looks like wheat and corn are similarly, they have different milling characteristics, of course, but from a particle standpoint, you can use about the same guidelines in wheat and corn. I should have mentioned with a lot of places that use wheat as well. So bottom line, it looks like from an economic and a milling standpoint, we're targeting 550 to 600 from that standpoint. And as Pedro talked about, you know, we still run into in the Midwest 700, 750 on a pretty typical, relatively typical basis. Although we get a lot of production systems that are hitting these targets on a regular basis as well, because it'll be $1 to $1.50 a pig from a milling standpoint. moving back in, also looking at the effects of mortality on feed efficiency, and plugging that into the calculator again, trying to bring in so that you can calculate some of the economics of feed efficiency based on mortality, and add that into not just the loss and the cost from the pigs, but also the impact that it has on feed utilization, because when you have dead pigs that have ate feed, it certainly makes their feed efficiency poor. And we're focused on, from a feed processing standpoint too, trying to focus, this is in a field study with John DeYoung and Holden Farms, trying to look at the effect of pelleting regimens on some of the mortality rates and feed efficiency improvements. This kind of derived from the question of, if we have a pellet mill and I'm not able to pellet all my diets into my production system, what phase of production do I get the best feed efficiency benefit from in pelleting? And basically, from a feed efficiency standpoint, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, whenever you pellet, you get, and you have good quality pellets, you get the feed efficiency improvement. Some people like to put the pellets early where you have the more expensive diets. Some people use pellets later where the feed efficiency, it's the absolute level of the feed efficiency is higher, and so you get a better improvement from that perspective. And then here we looked at a rotated 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, trying to see if there was any difference there. And you can see in the overall, basically, from a feed efficiency standpoint, it's like a light switch. When you have pellets, you get the benefit. When you don't have pellets, you get an intermediate. And then when you rotate, you get an intermediate benefit. What we did this on a commercial scale, on a larger scale, trying to get at some of the mortality associations. We know there's some kind of negative impacts on pelleting, but it's not. It's very. We've been usually the size of the scope of the scale of the trials we can do can easily pick up the pelleting effect. But again, we get into the mortality side, it's a lot more variable. On this one, we tried to take it to a scale, and where you can see we had some impact on removals and deads. You can see we did get a increase on the pelleting side, and you can see it's intermediate where we rotated the pellets in the meal, as you'd expect. Again, when we calculated in the mortality in this scenario, and again, I can't even remember what this was a while ago when we did the economics, but we weren't able to justify pelleting from an income over feed cost in a limited space scenario within this production system at that time. Now, in other times, if there's no impact on mortality, pelleting can be $3 to $5 a pig advantage as well. So there's few feed processing technologies that can impact feed costs that much, going from a negative 2 or 3 to a positive 4 or 5. So the pelleting question is a continual one that needs to be economically evaluated. It was in a commercial research barn. Yep. So moving back into trying to bring some of these mortality scenarios into some of our feed efficiency tool, trying to characterize average daily gain and feed efficiency. To me, are usually fairly easily to characterize. When we get into this mortality side, a lot tougher to calculate the economics, and so trying to bring some tools in to maybe look at that. Also, floor space, probably one of the biggest fixed costs is going to be barn. Our second biggest cost after feed is going to be barn rent, and so utilization of finishing space. And here, again, Josh Floor did a nice meta-analysis from that. And in fact, he's like giving a talk next door on the same topic that we're back-to-back. So much more detail on that. The interesting thing out of this analysis was where he put 30 some different studies together, and the traditional floor space equation, I think, is the Gagne one from 2006, and there they limited the number of papers based on the design. And here we used a mixed model analysis and didn't limit as many papers and pulled them in. And this is a good example of course, we got the average daily gain. We're able to characterize the average daily gain. The interesting part is if you look in the literature, floor space, to my knowledge, I can't remember exactly how many studies, but there's very few studies that show a significant difference of an impact on feed efficiency with floor space. But we put all the studies together, and there is an impact on feed efficiency. So this is a classic case of meta-analysis where you combine data from a lot of different sources, and there's small effects that aren't significant, and they become significant when you got enough power in the study. And you can see from a 368 to a 354, the effect is not near as big as it is on average daily gain on a percentage basis, but from an economic standpoint, it does significantly influence the scenario of what my stocking density is. And where we've really seen this is when you look at, as we've gone to heavier market weights and look at some of our floor stocking scenarios in the late finishing, this tool, that's also another thing that Josh has built in there is we've used some of the marketing data so you can plug in looking at the feed efficiency in that late finishing period where those pigs are at, where we've got 275, 280 pounds that may be at 6, 8, 7 square feet. You can calculate some of those feed efficiency impacts out there in the late finishing period, and they definitely do. This is one that after we did this analysis, it's really changed my thinking about the impact on feed efficiency as well, and some of the economic calculations. We also have in here a tool where you can put in like feed additive A, feed additive B, look at the expected feed efficiency response, and then look at the percentage overall change. You can put it in by phase, what you think the percentage will be, and do some more calculated scenarios in there. Another one we have is the feed efficiency. We have an adjustment calculator. We always get a lot of questions about different scenarios of where I have an initial weight, a final weight, the impact. We know all these factors impact different feed efficiencies, and so basically what we want to look at is from a baseline value. If I'm looking at closeouts from somebody else and they have pelleted diets versus meal diets, what would be my expected feed efficiency if I was feeding pelleted diets? Or what would be my expected feed efficiency if we had a similar market weight? So that was this kind of tool that Marcio Goncalves put together, pull in a lot of the different factors and have a crude way of developing this adjusted feed efficiency so I can tell if I held all the factors similar that are not similar across our production system, can I what kind of feed efficiency do I have? And I know some of our, there's a lot of assumptions that go into this, and I'm sure some of them are not right, but you can look at the tool and see the underlying equations, and if you have a better one, you can certainly plug it in there from your own perspective. And then we've spent a lot of time on the growing pig. This is one. We're also trying to look at feed efficiency of sows and gilts under commercial production with an ESF. And this is one where we're just trying to figure out what is the way do you measure feed efficiency. You know, what is our input of feed is usually pretty easy. But then, well, how do you measure it? Do we do feed efficiency per pound of litter weight gain, per pound of pig weaned, or per unit of pig weaned? So we're really at the early stages here, looking at differences in feed efficiency within stages of production, and we've done some initial studies. We looked at late lysine and energy, and you know, we get phenomenal differences. The lysine requirement of these animals are very high, but then and can improve their feed efficiency, but it doesn't improve their productive output of increased milk or increased pigs weaned. And so we're trying to understand the economics and understand the calculations there. So stay tuned for more in that area. Pedro also alluded to the swinefeedefficiency.com. This was a big USDA project that was joint between Iowa State and Kansas State that looked at the various aspects of feed efficiency, all the way from research projects on genetics to extension outreach efforts with a couple of conferences and this website. And you can see there's all kinds of different fact sheets here that are in a short 1 or 2 page formula or format and they have a nice thing with them too. They have a list of references that kind of will point you in other directions too if you need. So they are summarized in an extension format, but give you some references there if you want to dig in and go further there as well. Moving back, wrapping it up here, just back the calculators and tools and stuff, and just wanted to highlight some of the different tools that we use, just trying to educate both our students and producers and the people we work with some of the concepts that we've published and other people have published in an equation format, and translating that out into a more understandable format.